War collection to their exclusive line of insurance-approved TL-rated precious metal safes, SD Bullion has what you're looking for at the lowest prices, period. Guaranteed. Find out why over 15,000 new customers have recently made the switch to buying their gold and silver from the dock. Give SD Bullion the opportunity to earn your business today. Why pay more? Hey everyone, this is Elijah Johnson with FinanceAndLiberty.com, and back with us today is Jim Willie, editor of the Hattrick Letter, found on GoldenJackass.com. Jim, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good to be back on, and oh my gosh, so much is going on. It's just amazing. We're in climax times here, Eli.
Definitely, and the first topic I'd like to discuss is that you've said that the economic reset that you see coming has actually been once again delayed for 1 year. Do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Yes. It's not like you pick up the New York Times or you watch on CBS News or Fox News or you pick up anywhere in a magazine. They don't come out and say, oh, there's a reset delay. Well, that would admit that they know that there's a reset at all. And the reset is basically to remove the dollar from the global reserve currency status. We had a year ago, a little over a year ago, we had a delay in the reset. There was an agreement among something like 100 nations, 110 nations in January of 2014, but to do a reset. The dollar is being abused. The dollar is like a cancer across the world for trade and banking and everything. And now you're seeing more evidence that it truly is a problem. It's rising too much. It's causing tremendous problems in the rest of the world. I just had a friend, for instance, tell me, Jim, I'm in Dominican Republic right now. I'm visiting my family. And prices are all up 25 or 30% compared to 18 months ago. 18 months, almost 2 years ago since my last visit. Why is that? And I said, because the dollar's going up. It's wrecking the world economy. The weaker economies are seeing price inflation at the ground level. Anyway, back to January 2014, the United States decided, because, we're lord of the world and we're the exceptional nation, as in exceptionally corrupt and violent, the United States decided, well, we're going to have a Ukraine war. And we're going to blame it on Russia. Because the brain-dead American public, well, they'll accept that story, even the educated brain-dead American public. So they decided to do a Ukraine coup d'etat, and they stole 33 tons of gold from the central bank, pointed rifles, machine guns at the air tower, controller tower in Kiev, and did a 3 a.m. escape of the 33 tons of gold. Of course, taken to New York for safekeeping because it's an unstable nation. They'll never see that gold again. All right, now we're seeing that an agreement's been made a little bit more above the table between China and the United States. China has actually admitted we're not quite ready for international usage of the RMB. I'm going to be calling it the RMB. It's easier to say. It's the Chinese yuan currency, RMB standing for renminbi, which is Chinese for people's money. It's the common name for the Chinese money, RMB. The Chinese admitted we don't have sufficient RMB-based bonds to load up around the world for the reserve setting, the reserve deposits, the reserve foundation for the global banking system. He's referring to, the officials of China are referring to, 20, 30, 50 nations don't have sufficient. They've got something like 1.9% of all the global reserves in the banking system being RMB. And that's just not enough. And they're not quite ready with other things like international centers. They call them RMB hubs. They've got one in London. They've got one in Frankfurt. They've obviously got others in Asia. But they're not quite ready for sufficient exchange and transfers from other major Western currencies, like the major ones in the IMF basket, the dollar, the euro, the pound, and the yen from Japan. They're not ready yet. They don't have enough transfers and flow and exchange going between RMB and the major currencies. So one of the reasons why the Chinese were told we're not going to allow the RMB in the IMF's special drawing rights basket of currency, this was 2 months ago, was that there's really not enough RMB volume out there in the debt market, in the credit, what do you call it, the bond markets, the fixed bond market. Not enough RMB bonds out there. So you can't put the RMB in the IMF basket of currencies if there's not enough to put in. You know, of course, there might have been some heavy-handed element to that. You know, the U.S. saying, no, screw them, we're not going to do it yet. It might lead to too much RMB purchase. Well, it's going to inevitably. But what I'm hearing is that the Chinese were just not ready. They agreed to do a delay. And what is the reset anyway? It's pushing the dollar out of its global reserve status. That's a very delicate and powerful status that the dollar has. It means that the United States can run trade deficits galore without any consequence to the U.S. economy. It means the rest of the world will finance our deficits. And they don't want to anymore. And especially since we have the unsterilized bond monetization going on at the Fed called QE, which is quantitative easing, which is kind of a weird word. It just means open the spigot, ease the spigot, and let's pour out the money. We're easing the quantity of money, the water. Meantime, China is working vigorously on several hundred factories and projects inside the United States, Eli. The free trade zone concept and framework is very much alive and well. And I put in the September Hetrick Letter report that was out about a week ago, a map. And you touch on, say, New York, and you'll see a list of all the factories as part of free trade zone. You click on Texas, and you get a list of all the factories as part of the free trade zone. Click on Wisconsin, the same. California, the same. Almost every state, and it was color-coded. The darker the color, the more factories, Chinese-owned, were in the state. The lighter the color of the state, the fewer the factories were. I had no idea. I thought that there were 3 or 4 states. I didn't know it was over 45. So it's part of a commercial colonization, I really believe. So anyway, the U.S. doesn't mind having more time. It gives them more of an opportunity to wreck other economies like Syria, like Iraq, like heck, all of Europe. We're doing a great job wrecking their economy ever since the Ukraine war and the Russian sanctions. And now we're having lots and lots and lots of, they're not migrants. They're refugees that lost their homes, that got bombed out, can't feed themselves because the marketplaces got bombed out in Syria. So anyway, we don't mind more time. It gives the U.S. government, the Federal Reserve, and the Langley boys an opportunity to wreck the economy and steal more gold and have more fun.
Definitely, and I just wanted to ask a quick question about if the U.S. is, using this time to steal more gold, and also you talked about how they stole gold from Ukraine. I mean, how much gold is this? And I know I've talked with other guests before on my show who say, China is acquiring all the gold, and therefore China in the future will be this great big superpower. Who has the gold makes the rules, and China will really be in charge. But how much gold, is this a significant amount of gold that the U.S. is acquiring? And if so, does that mean the U.S. might retain its economic power?
No, the U.S. is really trying to steal small amounts of gold. Just take a look back at Libya a couple of years ago. Libya was doing very well. Libya had a lot of praise given it for a lot of its humanitarian projects, water system, underground canal systems. There was a lot of praise given by other Arab nations for humanitarian projects that Gaddafi had ordered across the Arab world. And the problem there was that Gaddafi was trying to work on getting his nation's 130 33 tons of gold sitting in London to be used for an Arab gold dinar that the Western world would have to use in order to make payments for North African oil. And the U.S. didn't like that, so we killed him and disemboweled him and stuck him in a culvert and took a lot of pictures, and the American public thought that was pretty cool. And then the London bankers announced that the 140 tons of gold sitting in London under the in the name of Gaddafi or the government of Libya or whatever, that there were 20 requirements to get back their gold, and they'll never see that gold ever again. All right, 140 tons is not a huge amount. The 33 tons stolen from Kiev, Ukraine, is not a huge amount. I'm told that Syria has 140 tons of gold also. That's not a huge amount. But what's preventing the Bush family, which is running as a wing of Langley, from stealing that gold in Damascus, Syria? The answer is the Russian military is now protecting the central bank gold in Syria. So it becomes a pretty complicated enterprise of stealing gold when the Chinese and Russians take on the role of being a protector. Okay, so it gets complicated. If you want to talk about volume, discuss the Congo. The Congo is responsible, in my opinion, based on all the information I get, for supplying on an annual basis to China through Dubai somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 tons per year. 10 times more than what was stolen in Libya, 10 times more than what they want to steal in Syria, and 30 to 40 times more than what was stolen in Ukraine. It's called the distress zone, the distress zones of Africa. All right, I don't think the United States is going to get the upper hand in gold ownership. Don't worry about that. No, because the rest of the world is acquiring gold. And besides, the White Dragons, as a result of violations that they determined were committed regarding the entire foundation and creation, setup of the euro currency, they determined that their Asian gold, mostly China, their Asian gold from the White Dragon families was improperly used for fraudulent creation of the euro derivatives. So 1,000 tons was moved out of London starting in March of 2012, and it went all the way through to the end of 2014. That was 25 to 30,000 tons of gold. Compare that with the 140. Now, we're talking about chicken feed on the floor that the Bush family and Langley are trying to pick up, compared to thousands that the Chinese are acquiring. And when you read the official news, official data from central bank gold, there was another one that came out and said China's increased a few hundred tons. It's really a bunch of horse pucky and cow meadow muffins. If you want to eat it, go right ahead. I won't touch it because China has over 25,000 tons of gold. Russia has a similar amount. And the Indian households have, I think they have 15 to 20,000 tons. And the U.S. claims to have 8,500, number one on the list. They have zero. So, don't worry. The gold game is not something that the U.S. government and the criminal organizations through the bankers are going to take control of. It's not going to happen. China's already leaps and bounds ahead. Russia's already leaps and bounds ahead. So it's going to get very complicated, Eli, this climax time.
All right. Well, I'd like to move our focus now to the Federal Reserve. Now, recently, some people were thinking that they'd raise interest rates, but they ended up not raising interest rates. And you've said that the Fed is actually trapped and cannot hike rates for many reasons. Did you want to discuss some of these reasons?
Sure. I've mentioned them before, probably on this show, maybe more than once. But they're very interesting and important to review again. I remember something from back in Alcoholics Anonymous. A great phrase. A dog will return to its vomit. Now, that is a very profound point. Did we not have taper talk in the summer of 2013? The Fed mentioned that they were going to raise rates. They call it the taper talk. I said it was a bunch of nonsense and distraction and propaganda and a bunch of hooey. And by September of 2013, did we not conclude that the taper talk was nonsense? Did we not conclude that the taper talk was to manage perceptions about central bank policy? The central bank is overly concerned about inflation expectations, but they're also overly concerned about rate hike expectations. So if they maintain a climate that eventually and soon the Fed's going to raise rates, then the dollar is better off, the dollar is safer, the Treasury bond is more on safe footing. Oh my gosh. So what are the reasons? I was asked a few times a month ago, Jim, you think this is finally it? They're going to do a rate hike? And I said, only if they want to kill the dollar, only if they want to kill Wall Street banks, only if they want to kill the Treasury bond, only if they want to kill the Federal Reserve's balance sheet. Why is that? What's going on? Well, a rate hike would take away the feeder tube on the interest rate swap derivative machinery. What is that? Well, they take the free money. They can't do a rate hike. They can't take away the free money. The free money is used as a feeder tube. In goes the free money, comes out. It enters like a short, technically, a short on the Treasury bill. So they short the near 0% Treasury bill, push it through the machine, do these swaps, and they get complicated. And I once had Rob Kirby explain to me in 5 minutes, and I said, I think I get it. I'm not sure, but I think I get it. Okay, they do swaps of this, cash market, coupon market, this and that, and out on the other end, with the 0% shorted bill on the one side, out on the other hand comes a demand for a 10-year Treasury bond. Well, gosh, they wreck that whole machinery if they do a rate hike. And that interest rate swap contract is responsible for perhaps 70 to 80% of all the Treasury bond demand, because there isn't any demand by investors. Okay, what else? It would torpedo the Wall Street bank bond carry trade. They do the same sort of thing, but without the machinery. They just do a bond futures spread. It shorts the Treasury bill on the short side, goes long the Treasury bond, tops off with 30-fold leverage. They profit on the 2% difference, multiply it by 30. They get 60% on their investment, but what's the feeder system for it? The free money. So they just tack it on, more volume, make 60% a year on trillions. I'd like to do that. Okay, what else? They're not going to do an interest rate hike on the borrowing costs for the treasuries, U.S. Treasury bonds that are rolled over and the current year. I mean, it comes to more than just the $1 trillion a year in deficit that gets converted to a security. It's far more than that. It's all the rollovers, all the maturing bonds, the short terms, the 5 years, the 2 years. They get rolled over, and they all would have a higher interest rate. So are they going to willfully, voluntarily increase the U.S. government deficits by $200 to $300 billion? Of course not. Only idiots think that. Only the stupidest people in the crowd think the Fed is going to do a rate hike. Only the dumbest shits in the audience conclude, well, they have to. No, they don't. Since when do they have to honor reasonable, acceptable practices? No, not at all. So they're not going to wreck the Wall Street banks. They're not going to wreck their own balance sheet that's loaded with treasury bonds. They're not going to wreck the interest rate machinery, the swap machinery, the derivative machinery that produces the demand. Take away the demand, and what are you left with? You're left with China buying a few droplets, maybe. Lately, they're dumping $100 billion a month. You get the Japanese buying a bit, only to replace what we stole from their $1.2 trillion worth of government pension funds. That was an autumn 2014 event that was really reported in the U.S. press as a positive event. You know, Japan, Bank of Japan was going to do unlimited QE to support the whole system. Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, they're going to replace their $1.2 trillion that we stole. So when you wonder when is the reset going to come, look at the events where the U.S. sustains the system through more corruption and war and thefts. Stealing $1.2 trillion from Japan in the autumn months of 2014 allows the U.S. to continue for another year. Oh my gosh! No, you know, I call QE, Eli. I call QE the bond hypermonetary bond inflation. I call QE a death sentence for the dollar. Why? Because the whole world is saving in terms of treasury bonds, and we're printing them. Do you want your savings account to be undermined by your neighbor counterfeiting the same item? I mean, this is not taper talk anymore. It's moron talk.